You're with us for another deep dive. And today, well, we're really getting into something fundamental, the buildings all around us.
Absolutely. They shape so much of our experience.
Yeah, and you shared some fascinating material articles, research, that section1.pdf doc with the visuals. And our mission today really is to pull out the key insights on ecological construction. You know, why it matters, what the benefits are, basically saving you time.
Exactly. Giving you that clear understanding. We're looking at the whole built environment, every structure we use.
Right.
And as the sources show, this construction environment deeply impacts nature, our economy, even culture.
So ecological construction, it's presented as more than just a trend.
Oh, definitely. It's seen as this ongoing process, an evolution towards building practices that are healthier, stronger, more sustainable, and even regenerative.
Regenerative. Okay, we'll come back to that.
Yeah, the goal being a higher standard of living overall.
So when we talk ecological construction, what are we actually, defining here? The readings say it's a continuous improvement process.
That's the core idea. Making buildings better across the board, healthier, more solid, sustainable, and like you said, regenerative.
And it's not just like putting solar panels on a house.
Not at all. It's much more integrated. The material stresses, this applies at all scale.
From single homes to...
The whole cities, yeah. Urban planning fits into.
Okay. And the term sustainability comes up a lot. It's broader than just green, isn't it?
Much broader. Environmental responsibility is key, of course.
Yeah.
But it also folds in social equity and economic viability.
So creating places that are good for the planet.
Healthy for people, fair to communities, and actually make economic sense long term. That's the goal.
That sounds like a tricky balancing act.
It can be, and that's where the triple bottom line concept mentioned in the sources comes in handy.
Ah, yes, the triple bottom line. People, planet, and prosperity. Or profit.
Prosperity or profit, yeah, you see both. It's a framework to gauge the true impact beyond just the financial side.
So people is about the social side.
Exactly. How does it affect the community? The workers, the folks who will actually live or work there.
And planet is the environmental stewardship bit.
Right. Minimizing harm, maybe even doing some good for the local environment.
And prosperity.
That's the long-term economic health. Is the project financially sound, but also contributing positively over its life? It forces you to see how these three are linked.
So a project that makes money but wrecks the environment isn't truly successful by this measure.
Precisely. Ecological construction aims for that sweet spot where all three overlap.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, material also had some frankly startling numbers about traditional buildings in the U.S. What stood out?
They really do paint a picture. Your readings highlight things like 14% of potable water use, that's treated drinking water.
14%, wow.
And 30% of raw material use. Then there's energy, about 40% of total energy consumption.
40%, that's huge.
It is. And linked to that, around 38% of CO2 emissions, plus nearly a quarter, 24%, of solid waste generation.
Okay, wait, and electricity?
A massive 72% of all electricity consumed.
Good grief. Those figures really drive home the scale of the impact.
They absolutely do.
And it's not just about resource consumption during operation, is it? The sources talk about accumulated impacts too.
Yes, exactly. It's the whole life cycle. Conventional construction has these ripple effects. Well, clearing land distorts habitats, obviously. Extracting and making materials. That often pollutes air and water, sometimes with toxic stuff.
Right.
The actual construction work creates tons of waste and uses a lot of resources on site.
And then there's getting everything and everyone to the site.
Yeah, transportation materials, workers, that means more pollution, more energy use. It's this whole web of environmental burdens.
It really sounds like a system overdue for an overhaul, which brings us nicely to ecological construction's rise. What's pushing this forward?
Well, the main driver, as your material suggests, is just this growing awareness of how damaging conventional building can be. We understand the impacts better now.
So realizing the old ways aren't sustainable.
Exactly. But it's not only environmental guilt, so to speak. The economic advantages are being recognized more and more.
Ah, the economics. I think some people still assume green automatically means more expensive.
That's a common perception, yeah. But the sources challenge it. There's a study mentioned, New Buildings Institute. It projected that efficient buildings could use up to 26% less energy and maybe 27% higher occupant satisfaction, lower maintenance.
Lower maintenance, too. Interesting.
And potentially 33% lower CO2 emissions compared to average buildings. Now, these are projections for efficient buildings specifically.
Still, significant numbers. And benefits for the people inside.
Definitely. Better lighting, better air quality.
Right.
The sources mentioned this leads to higher satisfaction and potentially productivity gains.
Productivity.
Yeah, research from Carnegie Mellon University suggested it could be anywhere from a 2% to 16% increase.
Wow. So it's not just about saving on the energy bill. It hits the bottom line in other ways, too.
It seems so. It's this combination of doing better for the planet and potentially seeing real benefits for occupants and finances.
Okay, so let's talk LED. That acronym pops up all the time in this space.
Right. LED. Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design.
Developed by the U.S. Green Building Council.
That's right, the USGBC. They formed back in '92 to champion these kinds of practices. LE itself launched in 1999.
And its purposes.
It's basically a rating system. It sets benchmarks for designing, building, operating, and maintaining high-performance green buildings.
So it provides a standard.
Exactly. And it's evolved, too. Now it includes things like neighborhood development, looking beyond just a single building.
And governments are paying attention?
Increasingly, yes. Your readings mention government bodies adopting LE, even incentivizing it for public projects. That shows its credibility.
What kind of things does LE actually look at?
Oh, a whole range. Energy efficiency, water use, indoor air quality, the materials chosen, where the building is sited. It's pretty comprehensive.
Okay. And the documents also had that diagram, figure 1.3, about emission scopes. Can you break that down quickly?
Sure. It's a way to categorize a building's greenhouse gas emissions to see where they come from. Scope 1 is direct emissions.
Like burning gas on site.
Exactly. Or emissions from fleet vehicles the building owns. Scope 2 is indirect emissions from purchased energy.
So the electricity from the power plant.
Right. The emissions happen elsewhere, but they're because of the building's demand for electricity or purchased heat or cooling.
And scope 3.
That's sort of everything else indirect. Emissions from making the materials used, employee commuting, transporting goods, even transmission losses from the grid. Things linked to the building's activity, but not directly controlled.
So understanding those scopes helps pinpoint where to make cuts.
Precisely. It helps target reduction strategies effectively.
Got it. Now, focusing on energy again, the sources really stress consumption during operation. Why is that such a big focus?
Well, a huge chunk of a building's lifetime energy use is just running it day to day. Heating, cooling, lighting.
The basics.
Right. There's a stat in there that U.S. office buildings spend about 30% of their energy just on those functions.
30%. Okay.
So ecological designs really prioritize efficiency here to slash that operational energy use and cut the carbon footprint over the building's life.
And this isn't only about brand new construction, right? I saw adaptive reuse mentioned.
Yes, adaptive reuse, finding new uses for old buildings, is highlighted as a really sound ecological practice.
How so?
Well, figure 1.6 in your material illustrates it well. A building's biggest emission spike is often right at the start, the construction itself. All that embodied energy and carbon.
Ah, right.
So by reusing an existing structure and focusing on making it energy efficient through operation and retrofits, you avoid that huge initial impact of demolition and new construction. You leverage the resources already invested.
That's a really efficient way to think about resources. Makes perfect sense. Another key factor discussed was site selection. How critical is where you build?
It's fundamental, really. Sustainable site planning means carefully considering a bunch of factors.
Such as?
The natural context is one, climate, soil, existing plants. Then there's infrastructure, or the roads, transit, utilities already there.
Okay.
And also the social context, connections to the community, local culture.
So it's not just the building itself, but how it plugs into everything around it.
Exactly. A smart site choice minimizes impact. Like building your public transit cuts down on commuting emissions.
Right. That makes sense.
Figures 1.4 and 1.5 in the readings show visually how much difference existing infrastructure makes to the footprint. Good site selection enhances the building's performance and the well-being of the people using it.
Let's circle back to cost. We touched on long-term savings, but what about that upfront investment? Is green always pricier initially?
That's the big question, isn't it? The material tackles this perception head-on. It cites a study by Davis Langdon, which basically found no statistically significant cost difference between new LE buildings and conventional ones.
Really? No significant difference.
That's what the study suggested. So that initial green premium might be smaller or even non-existent sometimes compared to what people think.
And then you have the long-term savings we talked about.
Exactly. Reduced energy and water bills add up significantly over decades.
Are there other financial upsides mentioned?
Yes, a couple of studies are referenced. One from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development pointing to an average 7% drop in operating costs for green buildings.
7% lower operating costs.
And a U.S. General Services Administration study found lower operational costs and higher asset value for their LED buildings.
Higher value. Interesting.
Plus, there's evidence suggesting better market demand. A CoStar Group analysis indicated LED offices might get higher rents and occupancy rates.
So the financial case seems pretty strong, especially long-term.
It's certainly becoming more compelling, lower running costs, potentially higher value and demand. It looks quite positive.
Okay, looking ahead now. The material talks about moving beyond just minimizing harm. This is the regenerative idea again.
That's right. The thinking is shifting. Instead of just being less bad, can buildings actually contribute positively?
How would that work?
Regenerative design aims for buildings that improve the environment around them. Maybe they generate more energy than they use, or clean water, or improve local air quality.
Wow.
They could conserve resources, maybe even enhance biodiversity, think green roofs, integrated habitats.
So buildings as part of the solution, not just less of the problem.
That's the aspiration. And alongside that, the focus on the people inside the building is growing too.
The occupant experience.
Absolutely. Creating healthier, more comfortable indoor spaces is central. Better light, better air, non-toxic materials.
Because a healthy building helps support healthy, productive people.
That's the idea. Good for the planet, good for the people.
It all sounds great, but the material also notes this requires, well, a shift in how we actually do construction. The human element.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
It emphasizes that ecological construction needs new skills, more knowledge, and crucially, much more collaboration.
Collaboration between
Architects, engineers, builders, operators. Everyone involved needs to work together more closely from the start. And there's a need for continuous learning as the field keeps evolving.
So it's a fundamental change in approach.
It really is. A different way of seeing our relationship with the built environment, but one with potentially huge positive outcomes for the future.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, it seems clear ecological construction is moving from niche to necessary. It addresses the big impacts of traditional building, offers real economic and social upsides.
And it's constantly improving, with frameworks like LT helping to push it forward.
Hopefully this conversation has given you, our listener, a much clearer picture of this vital field and what it means for all of us.
Yeah, it's about how we build our future, quite literally.
Which leaves us with a final thought. Given how much buildings shape our world and our lives, what role do you see these ecological principles playing as we move forward? In our communities, maybe even in your own well-being. What other questions pop into your head now when you look at the buildings around you?
Definitely something to ponder.
It's a field that's not standing still, that's for sure. Thanks for exploring it with us today.